Now, the famous Annihilation of Caste. Originally, this was a speech prepared by Dr. Ambedkar to be delivered at the annual conference of the Jat-Pat Torak Mandal of Lahore in 1936. Owing to the cancellation of the conference by the reception committee on the ground that the views expressed in this speech would be unbearable to the conference, this speech was never delivered. Friends, I am really sorry for the members of the Jat-Pat Torak Mandal who have so very kindly invited me to preside over their conference. I am sure they will be asked many questions for having selected me as the president. The Mandal will be asked to explain as to why it has imported a man from Bombay to preside over a function which is held in Lahore. I believe that the Mandal could easily have found someone better qualified than myself to preside on the occasion. I have criticized the Hindus. I have questioned the authority of the Mahatma whom they revere. They hate me. To them, I am a snake in their garden. The Mandal will no doubt be asked by the politically minded Hindus to explain why it has called me to fill this place of honor. It is an act of great daring. I shall not be surprised if some political Hindus regard it as an insult. This selection of mine cannot certainly please the ordinarily religious-minded Hindus. The Mandal may be asked to explain why it has disobeyed the Shastric injunction in selecting the president. According to the Shastras, the Brahmin is appointed to be the Guru for the three Varnas. Varnanam Brahmano Guru is a direction of the Shastras. The Mandal therefore knows from whom a Hindu should take his lessons and from whom he should not. The Shastras do not permit a Hindu to accept anyone as his Guru merely because he is well versed. This is made very clear by Ramdas, a Brahmin saint from Maharashtra, who is alleged to have inspired Shivaji to establish a Hindu Raj. In his Dasbodh, a socio-political religious treatise on in Marathi verse, Ramdas asks, addressing the Hindus, can we accept an Antyaja, a so-called untouchable, to be our Guru because he is a Pandit, that is learned, and give an answer in the negative? What replies to give to these questions is a matter which I must leave to the Mandal. The Mandal knows best the reasons which led it to travel to Bombay to select a president, to fix upon a man so repugnant to the Hindus, and to descend so low in the scale as to select an Antyaja to address an audience of the Savarnas. As for myself, you will allow me to say that I have accepted the invitation much against my will and also against the will of many of my fellow untouchables. I know that the Hindus are sick of me. I know that I am not a persona grata with them. Knowing all this, I have deliberately kept myself away from them. I have no desire to inflict myself upon them. I have been giving expression to my views from my own platform. This has already caused a great deal of heartburning and irritation. I have no desire to ascend the platform of the Hindus to do within their sight what I have been doing within their hearing. If I am here, it is because of your choice and not because of my wish. Yours is a cause of social reform. That cause has always made an appeal to me, and it is because of this that I felt I ought not to refuse an opportunity of helping the cause, especially when you think that I can help it. Whether what I am going to say today will help you in any way to solve the problem you are grappling with is for you to judge. All I hope to do is to place before you my views on the problem. The path of social reform, like the path to heaven at any rate in India, is strewn with many difficulties. Social reform in India has few friends and many critics. The critics fall into two distinct classes. One class consists of political reformers and the other of the socialists. It was at one time recognized that without social efficiency, no permanent progress in other fields of activity was possible. That owing to mischief wrought by the evil customs, Hindu society was not in a state of efficiency, and that ceaseless efforts must be made to eradicate these evils. It was due to the recognition of this fact that the birth of the National Congress was accompanied by the foundation of the Social Conference. While the Congress was concerned with defining the weak points in the political organization of the country, the Social Conference was engaged in removing the weak points in the social organization of the Hindu society. For some time, the Congress and the Conference worked as two wings of one common activity, and they held their annual sessions in the same pandal. But soon the two wings developed into two parties, a political reform party and a social reform party, between whom there raged a fierce controversy. The Political Reform Party supported the National Congress and Social Reform Party supported the Social Conference. The two bodies thus became two hostile camps. The point at issue was whether social reform should precede political reform. For a decade, the forces were evenly balanced and the battle was fought without victory to either side. It was, however, evident that the fortunes of the Social Conference were ebbing fast. The gentlemen who presided over the sessions of the Social Conference lamented that the majority of the educated Hindus were for political advancement and indifferent to social reform, and that while the number of those who attended the Congress was very large, and the number who did not attend but who sympathized with it even larger, the number of those who attended the Social Conference was very much smaller. This indifference, this thinning of its ranks, was soon followed by active hostility from the politicians. Under the leadership of the late Mr. Tilak, the courtesy with which the Congress allowed the Social Conference the use of its pandal was withdrawn, and the spirit of enmity went into such a pitch that when the Social Conference desired to erect its own pandal, a threat to burn the pandal was held out by its opponents. Thus, in course of time, the party in favor of political reform won and the Social Conference vanished and was forgotten. The speech delivered by Mr. W.C. Banerjee in 1892 at Allahabad as president of the 8th session of the Congress sounds like a funeral oration at the death of the Social Conference and is so typical of the Congress attitude that I venture to quote from it the following extract. Mr. Banerjee said, "I for one have no patience with those who saw we shall not be fit for political reform until we reform our social system. I fail to see any connection between the two. Are we not fit for political reform because our widows remain unmarried and our girls are given in marriage earlier than in other countries? Because our wives and daughters do not drive about with us visiting our friends? Because we do not send our daughters to Oxford and Cambridge?" I have now, the quote ends and now Ambedkar is speaking again. "I have stated the case for political reform as put by Mr. Banerjee. There are many who are happy that the victory went to the Congress. But those who believe in the importance of social reform may ask, is the argument such as that of Mr. Banerjee final? Does it prove the victory went to those who were in the right? Does it prove conclusively that social reform has no bearing on political reform? It will help us to understand the matter if I state the other side of the case. I will draw upon the treatment of the untouchables for my facts. Under the rule of the Peshwas in the Maratha country, the untouchable was not allowed to use the public streets if a Hindu was coming along, lest he should pollute the Hindu by his shadow. The untouchable was required to have a black thread either on his wrist or in his neck as a sign or a mark to prevent the Hindus from getting themselves polluted by his touch through mistake. In Pune, the capital of the Peshwa, the untouchable was required to carry, strung from his waist, a broom to sweep away from behind the dust he treaded on, lest a Hindu walking on the same should be polluted. In Pune, the untouchable was required to carry an earthen pot, hung in his neck wherever he went, for holding his spit, lest his spit falling on earth should pollute a Hindu who might unknowingly happen to tread on it. Let me take more recent facts. The tyranny practiced by the Hindus upon the Balais, an untouchable community in central India, will serve my purpose. You will find a report of this in the Times of India of 4th January 1928. The report says, the correspondent reported that high caste Hindus vis-a-vis Kalotas, Rajputs and Brahmins, including the Patels and Patwadis of villages of Kanaria, Bicholi Hafsi, Bicholi Mardana, and of about 15 other villages in the Indore district of the Indore state, informed the Balais of their respective villages that if they wish to live among them district, they must conform to the following rules. Balais must not wear gold lace bordered pagris. Gold lace bordered pagris. They must not wear dhotis with colored or fancy borders. They must convey intimation of the death of any Hindu to relatives of the deceased, no matter how far away these relatives may be living. In all Hindu marriages, Balais must play music before the processions and during the marriage. Balai women must not wear gold or silver ornaments. They must not wear fancy gowns or jackets. Balai women must attend all cases of confinement of Hindu women. Balais must render services without demanding remuneration and must accept whatever a Hindu is pleased to give. If the Balais do not agree to abide by these terms, they must clear out of the villages. The Balais refused to comply, and the Hindu element proceeded against them. Balais were not allowed to get water from the village wells. They were not allowed to get They were not allowed to let go their cattle to graze. Balais were prohibited from passing through land owned by a Hindu, so that if the field of a Balai was surrounded by fields owned by Hindus, the Balai could have no access to his own field. The Hindus also let their cattle graze down the fields of Balais. The Balais submitted petitions to the Darbar against these persecutions, but as they could get no timely relief, and the oppression continued. Hundreds of Balais with their wives and children were obliged to abandon their homes in which their ancestors lived for generations and to migrate to adjoining states, vis-a-vis to villages in Dhar, Devas, Bagli, Bhopal, Gwalior, and other states. What happened to them in their new homes may for the present be left out of our consideration. The incident at Kavita in Gujarat happened only last year. The Hindus of Kavita ordered the untouchables not to insist upon sending their children to the common village school maintained by the government. What sufferings the untouchables of Kavita had to undergo for daring to exercise a civic right against the wishes of the Hindus is too well known to need detailed description. Another instance occurred in the village of Zanu in the Ahmedabad district of Gujarat. In November 1935, some untouchable women of well-to-do families started fetching water in metal pots. The Hindus looked upon the use of metal pots by untouchables as an affront to their dignity and assaulted the untouchable women for their impudence. A most recent event is reported from the village Chakwara in Jaipur state. It seems from the reports that have appeared in the newspapers that an untouchable of Chakwara who had returned from a pilgrimage had arranged to give a dinner to his fellow untouchables of the village as an act of religious piety. The host desired to treat the guests to a sumptuous meal, and the items served included ghee, clarified butter, also. But while the assembly of untouchables was engaged in partaking of the food, the Hindus in their 100, armed with lathis, rushed to the scene, despoiled the food, and belabored the untouchables who left the food they were served and ran for their lives. And why was this murderous assault committed on defenseless untouchables? The reason given is that the untouchable host was impudent enough to serve ghee and his untouchable guests were foolish enough to taste it. Ghee is undoubtedly a luxury for the rich, but no one would think that the consumption of ghee was a mark of high social status. The Hindus of Chakwara thought otherwise, and in righteous indignation avenged themselves for the wrong done to them by the untouchables, who insulted them by treating ghee as an item of their food, which they ought to have known could not be theirs, consistently with the dignity of the Hindus. This means that an untouchable must not use ghee even if he can afford to buy it, since it is an act of arrogance towards the Hindus. This happened on or about the 1st April of 1936. Having stated the facts, let me now state the case for social reform. In doing this, I will follow Mr. Banerjee as nearly as I can and ask the political-minded Hindus, are you fit for political power even though you do not allow a large class of your own countrymen like the untouchables to use public schools? Are you fit for political power even though you do not allow them the use of public wells? Are you fit for political power even though you do not allow them the use of public streets? Are you fit for political power even though you do not allow them to wear what apparel or ornaments they like? Are you fit for political power even though you do not allow them to eat any food they like? I can ask a string of such questions, but these will suffice. And I wonder what would have been the reply of Mr. Banerjee. I am sure no sensible man will have the courage to give an affirmative answer. Every congressman who repeats the dogma of Mill that one country is not fit to rule another country must admit that one class is not fit to rule another class. How is it then that the Social Reform Party lost the battle? To understand this correctly, it is necessary to take note of the kind of social reform which the reformers were agitating for. In this connection, it is necessary to make a distinction between social reform in the sense of the reform of the Hindu family and social reform in the sense of the reorganization of the reconstruction of the Hindu society. The former has relation to widow remarriage, child marriage, etc., while the latter relates to the abolition of the caste system. The Social Conference was a body which mainly concerned itself with the reform of the high caste Hindu family. It consisted mostly of enlightened high caste Hindus who did not feel the necessity for agitating for the abolition of caste or had not the courage to agitate for it. They felt quite naturally a greater urge to remove such evils as enforced widowhood, child marriages, etc. Evils which prevailed among them and which were personally felt by them. They did not stand up for the reform of the Hindu society. The battle that was fought centered round the question of the reform of the family. It did not relate to the social reform in the sense of the breakup of the caste system. It was never put in issue by the reformers. That is the reason why the Social Reform Party lost. I am aware that this argument cannot alter the fact that political reform did in fact gain precedence over social reform, but the argument has this much value, if not more. It explains why social reformers lost the battle. It also helps us to understand how limited was the victory which the political reform party obtained over the social reform party, and that the view that the social reform need not precede political reform is a view which may stand only when by social reform is meant the reform of the family. The political reform cannot with impunity take precedence over social reform in the sense of reconstruction of society is a thesis which I am sure cannot be controverted. That the makers of political constitutions must take account of social forces is a fact that which is recognized by no less a person than Ferdinand Lassalle, the friend and co-worker of Karl Marx. In addressing a Prussian audience in 1862, Lassalle, or I don't know how to pronounce it, Lassalle said, "The constitutional questions are in the first instance not questions of right but questions of might. The actual constitution of a country has its existence only in the actual condition of force which exists in the country. Hence, political constitutions have value and permanence only when they accurately express those conditions of force which exist in practice within a society." But it is not necessary to go to Prussia. There is evidence at home. What is the significance of the communal award with its allocation of political power in defined proportions to diverse classes and communities? In my view, for better explanations of communal award, you can check his book called Pakistan or the Partition of India. In my view, its significance lies in this, that political constitution must take note of social organization. It shows that the politicians who denied that the social problem in India had any bearing on the political problem were forced to reckon with the social problem in devising the constitution. The communal award is, so to say, the nemesis following upon the indifference and neglect of social reform. It is a victory for the Social Reform Party, which shows that, though defeated, they were in the right in insisting upon the importance of social reform. Many I know will not accept this finding. The view is current, and it is pleasant to believe in it, that the communal award is unnatural and that it is the result of an unholy alliance between the minorities and the bureaucracy. I do not wish to rely on the communal award as a piece of evidence to support my contention, if it is said that it is not good evidence. Let us turn to Ireland. What does the history of Irish Home Rule show? It is well known that in the course of the negotiations between the representatives of Ulster and Southern Ireland, Mr. Redmond, the representative of Southern Ireland, in order to bring Ulster in a Home Rule constitution common to the whole of Ireland, said to the representatives of Ulster, "Ask any political safeguards you like, and you shall have them." What was the reply that Ulstermen gave? Their reply was, "Damn your safeguards. We don't want to be ruled by you on any terms." People who blame the minorities in India ought to consider what would have happened to the political aspirations of the majority if the minorities had taken the attitude which Ulster took. Judged by the attitude of Ulster to Irish Home Rule, is it noting that the minorities agreed to be ruled by the majority, which has not shown much sense of statesmanship, provided some safeguards were divided for them? But this is only incidental. The main question is, why did Ulster take this attitude? The only answer I can give is that there was a social problem between Ulster and Southern Ireland, the problem between Catholics and Protestants, essentially a problem of caste. That Home Rule in Ireland would be Rome Rule was the way in which the Ulstermen had framed their answer. But that is only another way of stating that it was the social problem of caste between the Catholics and Protestants which prevented the solution of the political problem. This evidence again is sure to be challenged. It will be urged that here too the hand of the imperialist was at work. But my resources are not exhausted. I will give evidence from the history of Rome. Here no one can say that any evil genius was at work. Anyone who has studied the history of Rome will know that the Republican Constitution of Rome bore marks having strong resemblance to the communal award. When the kingship in Rome was abolished, the kingly power or the imperium was divided between the consuls and the pontifex maximus. In the consuls was vested the secular authority of the king, while the latter took over the religious authority of king. This Republican constitution had provided that of the two consuls, One was to be patrician and the other plebeian. The same constitution had also provided that of the priests under the Pontifex Maximus, half were to be plebeians and other half patricians. Why is it that the Republican Constitution of Rome had these provisions which, as I said, resemble so strongly the provisions of the communal award? The only answer one can get is that the Constitution of Republican Rome had to take account of the social division between the patricians and the plebeians, who formed two distinct castes. To sum up, let political reformers turn to any direction they like, they will find that in the making of a constitution, they cannot ignore the problem arising out of the prevailing social order. The illustrations which I have taken in support of the proposition that social and religious problems have a bearing on political constitutions seems to be too particular. Perhaps they are. But it should not be supposed that the bearing of the one on the other is limited. On the other hand, one can say that generally speaking, history bears out the proposition that political revolutions have always been preceded by social and religious revolutions. The religious reformation started by Luther was the precursor of the political emancipation of the European people. In England, Puritanism led to the establishment of political liberty. Puritanism founded the New World. It was Puritanism which won the War of American Independence, and Puritanism was a religious movement. The same is true of the Muslim Empire. Before the Arabs became a political power, they had undergone a thorough religious revolution started by Prophet Muhammad. Even Indian history supports the same conclusion. The political revolution led by Chandragupta was preceded by the religious and social revolution of Buddha. The political revolution led by Shivaji was preceded by the religious and social reform brought about by the saints of Maharashtra. The political revolution of the Sikhs was preceded by the religious and social revolution led by Guru Nanak. It is unnecessary to add more illustrations. These will suffice to show that the emancipation of the mind and soul is a necessary preliminary for the political expansion of the people. We enter the third part now, and let me take a drinks break. Let me now turn to the socialists. Can the socialists ignore the problem arising out of the social order? The socialists of India, following their fellows in Europe, are seeking to apply the economic interpretation of history to the facts of India. They propound that man is an economic creature, that his activities and aspirations are bound by economic facts, that property is the only source of power. They therefore preach that political and social reforms are but gigantic illusions, and that economic reform by equalization of property must have precedence over every other kind of reform. One may join issue on every one of these premises on which rests the socialists' case for economic reform having priority over every other kind of reform. One may contend that economic motive is not the only motive by which man is actuated. That economic power is the only kind of power no student of human society can accept. That the social status of an individual by itself often becomes a source of power and authority is made clear by the sway which the Mahatmas have held over the common man. Why do millionaires in India obey penniless sadhus and fakirs? Why do millions of paupers in India sell their trifling trinkets which constitute their only wealth and go to Banaras and Mecca? That religion is the source of power is illustrated by the history of India, where the priest holds a sway over the common man often greater than the magistrate, where everything, even such things as strikes and elections, so easily take a religious turn and can easily be given a religious twist. Take the case of the plebeians of Rome as a further illustration of the power of religion over man. It throws greater light on this point. The plebeians had fought for a share in the supreme executive under the Roman Republic and had secured the appointment of a plebeian consul elected by a separate electorate constituted by the Comitia Centuriata, which was an assembly of plebeians. They wanted a consul of their own because they felt that the patrician consuls used to discriminate against the plebeians in carrying on the administration. They had apparently obtained a great gain because under the Republican Constitution of Rome, one consul had the power of vetoing an act of the other consul. But did they in fact gain anything? The answer to this question must be in the negative. The plebeians never could get a plebeian consul who could be said to be a strong man and who could act independently of the patrician consul. In the ordinary course of things, the plebeians should have got a strong plebeian consul in view of the fact that his election was to be by a separate electorate of plebeians. The question is, why did they fail in getting a strong plebeian to officiate as their consul? The answer to this question reveals the dominion which religion exercises over the minds of men. It was an accepted creed of the whole Roman populace that no official could enter upon the duties of his office unless the oracle of Delphi declared that he was acceptable to the goddess. The priests who were in charge of the temple of the goddess of Delphi were all patricians. Whenever, therefore, the plebeians elected a consul who was known to be a strong party man opposed to the patricians or communal, quote-unquote communal, to use the term that is current in India, the oracle invariably declared that he was not acceptable to the goddess. This is how the plebeians were cheated out of their rights. But what is worthy of note is that the plebeians permitted themselves to be thus cheated because they too, like the patricians, held firmly the belief that the approval of the goddess was a condition precedent to the taking charge by an official of his duties, and that election by the people was not enough. If the plebeians had contended that election was enough and that the approval by the goddess was not necessary, they would have derived the fullest benefit from the political right which they had obtained. But they did not. They agreed to elect another, less suitable to themselves, but more suitable to the goddess, which in fact meant more amenable to the patricians. Rather than give up religion, the plebeians gave up material gain for which they had fought so hard. Does this not show that religion can be a source of power as great as money, if not greater? The fallacy of the socialists lies in supposing that because in the present stage of European society, property as a source of power is predominant, that the same is true of India, or that the same was true of Europe in the past. Religion, social status, and property are all sources of power and authority, which one man has to control the liberty of another. One is predominant at one stage, the other is predominant at another stage. That is the only difference. If liberty is the ideal, if liberty means the destruction of the dominion which one man holds over another, then obviously it cannot be insisted upon that economic reform must be the only kind of reform worthy of pursuit. If the source of power and dominion is social and religious, then social reform and religious reform must be accepted as the necessary sort of reform. One can thus attack the doctrine of economic interpretations of history adopted by the socialists of India. But I recognize that economic interpretation of history is not necessarily for the validity of the socialist contention that equalization of property is the only real reform and that it must precede everything else. However, what I like to ask the socialists is this: can you have economic reform without first bringing about a reform of the social order? The socialists of India do not seem to have considered this question. I do not wish to do them an injustice. I give below a quotation from a letter which a prominent socialist wrote a few days ago to a friend of mine, in which he said, "I do not believe that we can build up a free society in India so long as there is a trace of this ill treatment and suppression of one class by another. Believing as I do in a socialist ideal, inevitably I believe in perfect equality in the treatment of various classes and groups. I think that socialism offers the only true remedy for this as well as other problems." The quote ends. Now the question that I like to ask is it enough for a socialist to say, quote unquote, "I believe in perfect equality in the treatment of the various classes"? The quote ends. To say that such a belief is enough is to disclose a complete lack of understanding of what is involved in socialism. If socialism is a practical program and is not merely an ideal, distant and far off, the question for a socialist is not whether he believes in equality. The question for him is whether he minds one class ill-treating and suppressing another class as a matter of system, as a matter of principle, and thus allow tyranny and oppression to continue to divide one class from another. Let me analyze the factors that are involved in the realization of socialism in order to explain fully my point. Now, it is obvious that the economic reform contemplated by the socialists cannot come about unless there is a revolution resulting in the seizure of power. That seizure of power must be by a proletariat. The first question I ask is, will the proletariat of India combine to bring about this revolution? What will move men to such an action? It seems to me that other things being equal, the only thing that will move one man to take such an action is the feeling that other man with whom he is acting are actuated by feeling of equality and fraternity, and above all, of justice. Men will not join in a revolution for the equalization of property unless they know that after the revolution is achieved, they will be treated equally and that there will be no discrimination of caste and creed. The assurance of a socialist leading the revolution that he does not believe in caste, I am sure, will not suffice. The assurance must be the assurance proceeding from much deeper foundation, namely the mental attitude of the compatriots towards one another in their spirit of personal equality and fraternity. Can it be said that the proletariat of India, poor as it is, recognizes no distinctions except that of the rich and the poor? Can it be said that the poor in India recognize no such distinctions of caste or creed, high or low? If the fact is that they do, what unity of front can be expected from such a proletariat in its action against the rich? How can there be a revolution if the proletariat cannot present a united front? Suppose, for the sake of argument, that by some freak of fortune a revolution does take place and the socialists come in power, will they not have to deal with the problems created by the particular social order prevalent in India? I can't see how a socialist state in India can function for a second without having to grapple with the problems created by the prejudices which make Indian people observe the distinctions of high and low, clean and unclean. If socialists are not to be content with the mouthing of fine phrases, if the socialists wish to make socialism a definite reality, then they must recognize that the problem of social reform is fundamental and that for them there is no escape from it. That the social order prevalent in India is a matter which a socialist must deal with, that unless he does so, he cannot achieve his revolution, and that if he does achieve it as a result of good fortune, he will have to grapple with it if he wishes to realize his ideal, is a proposition which in my opinion is incontrovertible. He will be compelled to take account of caste after revolution, if he does not take account of it before revolution. This is only another way of saying that turn in any direction you like, caste is the monster that crosses your path. You cannot have political reform, you cannot have economic reform unless you kill this monster. Savarkar agrees. It is a pity that caste even today has its defenders. The defenses are many. It is defended on the ground that the caste system is but another name for division of labor. And if division of labor is a necessary feature of every civilized society, then it is argued that there is nothing wrong in the caste system. Now, the first thing to be urged against this view is that caste system is not merely division of labor. It is also a division of laborers. Civilized society undoubtedly needs division of labor, but in no civilized society is division of labor accompanied by this unnatural division of laborers into watertight compartments. Caste system is not merely a division of laborers, which is quite different from division of labor. It is a hierarchy in which the divisions of laborers are graded one above the other. In no other country is the division of labor accompanied by this gradation of laborers. There is also a third point of criticism against the view of the caste system. This division of labor is not spontaneous. It is not based on natural aptitudes. Social and individual efficiency requires us to develop the capacity of an individual to the point of competency to choose and to make his own career. This principle is violated in the caste system insofar as it involves an attempt to appoint tasks to individuals in advance, selected not on the basis of trained original capacities, but on that of the social status of the parents. Looked at from another point of view, this satisfaction of occupations, which is the result of the caste system, is positively pernicious. Industry is never static. It undergoes rapid and abrupt changes. With such changes, an individual must be free to change his occupation. Without such freedom to adjust himself to changing circumstances, it would be impossible for him to gain his livelihood. Now, the caste system will not allow Hindus to take to occupations where they are wanted if they do not belong to them by heredity. If a Hindu is seen to starve rather than to take new occupations not assigned to his caste, the reason is to be found in the caste system. By not permitting readjustment of occupations, caste becomes a direct cause of much of the unemployment we see in the country. As a form of division of labor, the caste system suffers from another serious defect. The division of labor brought about by the caste system is not a division based on choice. Individual sentiment, individual preference has no place in it. It is based on the dogma of predestination. Considerations of social efficiency would compel us to recognize that the greatest evil in the industrial system is not so much poverty and the suffering that it involves, as the fact that so many persons have callings which make no appeal to those who are engaged in them. Such callings constantly provoke one to aversion, ill will, and the desire to evade. There are many occupations in India which on account of the fact that they are regarded as degraded by the Hindus, provoke those who are engaged in them to aversion. There is a constant desire to evade and escape from such occupations, which arises solely because of the blighting effect which they produce upon those who follow them, owing to the slight and stigma cast upon them by the Hindu religion. What efficiency can there be in a system under which neither men's hearts nor their minds are in their work? As an economic organization, caste is therefore a harmful institution, inasmuch as it involves the subordination of man's natural powers and inclinations to the exigencies of social rules. Some have dug a biological trench in defense of the caste system. It is said that the object of caste was to preserve purity of race and purity of blood. Now, ethnologists are of the opinion that men of pure race exist nowhere and that there has been a mixture of all races in all parts of the world, especially in this case with the people of India. Dr. D.R. Bhandarkar in his paper on foreign elements in the Hindu population has stated that there is hardly a class or caste in India which has not a foreign strain in it. There is an admixture of alien blood not only among the warrior classes, the Rajputs and Marathas, but also among the Brahmins, who are under the happy delusion that they are free from all foreign elements. The caste system cannot be said to have grown as a means of preventing the admixture of races or as a means of maintaining purity of blood. As a matter of fact, caste system came into being long after the different races of India had commingled in blood and culture. To hold that distinctions of castes are really distinctions of race, and to treat different castes as though they were so many different races, is a gross perversion of facts. What racial affinity is there between the Brahmin of the Punjab and the Brahmin of Madras? What racial affinity is there between the untouchable of Bengal and the untouchable of Madras? What racial difference is there between the Brahmin of the Punjab and the chamar of the Punjab? What racial difference is there between the Brahmin of Madras and the pariah of Madras? The Brahmin of the Punjab is racially of the same stock as the chamar of the Punjab, and the Brahmin of Madras is of the same race as the pariah of Madras. Caste system does not demarcate racial division. Caste system is a social division of people of the same race. Assuming it, however, to be a case of racial divisions, one may ask, what harm could there be if a mixture of races and of blood was permitted to take place in India by intermarriages between different castes? Exactly what Savarkar says, and he calls it Beti Bandi, and he asks to abolish Beti Bandi. Men are no doubt divided from animals by so deep a distinction that science recognizes men and animals as two distinct species. But even scientists who believe in purity of races do not assert that the different races constitute different species of men. They are only varieties of one and the same species. As such, they can interbreed and produce an offspring which is capable of breeding and which is not sterile. An immense lot of nonsense is talked about heredity and eugenics in defense of the caste system. Few would object to the caste system if it was in accord with the basic principle of eugenics, because few can object to the improvement of the race by judicious noting. But one fails to understand how the caste system secures judicious mating. Caste system is a negative thing. It merely prohibits persons belonging to different castes from intermarrying. It is not a positive method of selecting which two among a given caste should marry. If caste is eugenic in origin, then the origin of subcastes must also be eugenic. But can anyone seriously maintain that the origin of subcastes is eugenic? I think it would be absurd to contend for such a proposition, and for a very obvious reason. If caste means race, then differences of subcastes cannot mean differences of race, because subcastes become ex hypothesia subdivisions of one and the same race. Consequently, the bar against intermarrying and interdining between, which is called Roti Bandi by Savarkar, and which he opposes, the bar against intermarrying and interdining between subcastes cannot be for the purpose of maintaining purity of race or of blood. If subcastes cannot be eugenic in origin, there cannot be any substance in the contention that caste is eugenic in origin. Again, if caste is eugenic in origin, one can understand the bar against intermarriage. But what is the purpose of the interdict placed on interdining between castes and subcastes alike? Interdining cannot infect blood, and therefore cannot be the cause either of the improvement or of deterioration of the race. This shows that caste has no scientific origin, and that those who are attempting to give it an eugenic basis are trying to support by science what is grossly unscientific. Even today, eugenics cannot become a practical possibility unless we have definite knowledge regarding the laws of heredity. Professor Bateson, in his Mendel's Principle of Heredity, says, Quote, there is nothing in the descent of the higher mental qualities to suggest that they follow any single system of transmission. It is likely that both they and the more marked developments of physical powers result rather from the coincidence of numerous factors than from the possession of any one genetic element. To argue that the caste system was eugenic in its conception is to attribute to the forefathers of present-day Hindus knowledge of heredity, which even the modern scientists do not possess. A tree should be judged by the fruits it yields. If caste is eugenic, what sort of a race of men it should have produced? Physically speaking, the Hindus are a C3 people. They are a race of pygmies and dwarfs, stunted in stature and wanting in stamina. It is a nation, 9/10 of which is declared to be unfit for military service. This shows that the caste system does not embody the eugenics of modern scientists. It is a social system which embodies the arrogance and selfishness of a perverse section of the Hindus who were superior enough in social status to set it in fashion and who had authority to force it on their inferiors. Caste does not result in economic efficiency. Caste does not result in economic efficiency. Caste cannot and has not improved the race. Caste has, however, done one thing. It has completely disorganized and demoralized the Hindus. The first and foremost thing that must be recognized is that Hindu society is a myth. The name Hindu itself, a foreign name, it was given by the Mohammedans to the natives for the purpose of distinguishing themselves. It does not occur in any Sanskrit word prior to the Mohammedan invasion. They did not feel the necessity of a common name because they had no conception of their having constituted a community. Hindu society as such does not exist. It is only a collection of castes. Each caste is conscious of its existence. Its survival is the be-all and end-all of its existence. Castes do not even form a federation. A caste has no feeling that it is affiliated to other castes, except when there is a Hindu-Muslim riot. On all other occasions, each caste endeavors to segregate itself and to distinguish itself from other castes. Each caste not only dines among itself and marries among itself, but each caste prescribes its own distinctive dress. What other explanation can there be of the innumerable styles of dress worn by the men and women of India, which so amuse the tourists? Indeed, the ideal Hindu must be like a rat living in his own hole, refusing to have any contact with others. There is an utter lack among Hindus of what the sociologists called consciousness of kind. There is no Hindu consciousness of kind. In every Hindu, the consciousness that exists is the consciousness of his caste. That is the reason why Hindus cannot be said to form a society or a nation. There are, however, many Indians whose patriotism does not permit them to admit that Indians are not a nation, that they are only an amorphous mass of people. They have insisted that underlying the apparent diversity, there is a fundamental unity which marks the life of the Hindus inasmuch as there is a similarity of habits and customs, beliefs and thoughts, which obtain all over the continent of India. Similarity in habits and customs, beliefs and thoughts there is, but one cannot accept the conclusion that therefore the Hindus constitute a society. To do so is to misunderstand the essentials which go to make up a society. Men do not become a society by living in physical proximity any more than a man ceases to be a member of his society by living so many miles away from other men. Secondly, similarity in habits and customs, beliefs and thoughts is not enough to constitute men into society. Things may be passed physically from one to another like bricks. In the same way, habits and customs, beliefs and thoughts of one group may be taken over by another group, and there may thus appear a similarity between the two. Culture spreads by diffusion, and that is why one finds similarity between various primitive tribes in the matter of their habits and customs, beliefs and thoughts, although they do not live in proximity. But no one could say that because there was this similarity, the primitive tribes constituted one society. This is because similarity in certain things is not enough to constitute a society. Men constitute a society because they have things which they possess in common. To have similar thing is totally different from possessing things in common. And the only way by which men can come to possess things in common with one another is by being in communication with one another. This is merely another way of saying that society continues to exist by communication indeed. To make it concrete, it is not enough if men act in a way which agrees with the acts of others. Parallel activity, even if similar, is not sufficient to bind men into a society. This is proved by the fact that the festivals observed by the different castes among the Hindus are the same. Yet these parallel performances of similar activities by the different castes have not bound them into one integral whole. For that purpose, what is necessary is for a man to share and participate in a common activity so that the same emotions are aroused in him that animate the others, making the individual a sharer or partner in the associated activity so that he feels its success as his success, Its failure as his failure is the real thing that binds men and makes a society of them. The caste system prevents common activity, and by preventing common activity, it has prevented the Hindus from becoming a society with a unified life and a consciousness of its own being.